Nicole, now a hurricane as it strengthens right before it's about to make landfall along the east central coast of Florida. We'll be taking a solid look at Nicole, and while we have hurricane warnings in Florida, we've got blizzard warnings up in the Dakotas. It's a nice combination to have both those things this time of year. And of course, there will be some implications with Nicole and whether that will bring up the eastern seaboard over the next couple of days. We'll talk about that, the rather cold and maybe even interesting long range. We'll see. All of that coming up tonight as we head into another episode of the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Omni True Value Hardware brings you the Joe and Joe Weather Show at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area with everything you need to make sure your home can get through and you can get through adverse weather safely, like batteries, generators, sump pumps, and of course make your yard and your home look beautiful on the outside with some mulch and topsoil. And remember, winter is one day closer, and that means snow removal products, and they are Long Island's largest rock salt source. 631-756-1125. They have the best prices anywhere. And the website, of course, as only Joe Rayo can say, is
OmniTrueValue.com, Joe.
Correct.
So here we are. Another day, another hurricane. What else is new?
And our resident statistician, Anthony Orr, says if Nicole holds hurricane intensity until landfall, and it's likely that it will, on the east coast of Florida, it will be the latest in a calendar year for a hurricane to make landfall on the east coast of Florida, beating the date of November 4th, 1935, Joe, which was the Yankee hurricane, known as the Yankee hurricane, back in 1935.
I guess he didn't get into why it was referred to as the Yankee hurricane, although I suspect it had nothing to do with Lou Gehrig or Babe Ruth. But some other reason.
Well, we'll have to Google it to find out. Very interesting here because when you look at, you got the hurricane warnings along the Florida coast. We've got blizzard warnings up for parts of the Dakotas with the storm system that's coming out of the Rockies and moving into the plains. And that actually is an important feature because that front is going to be the alleyway against Nicole, whatever remnant low there is, once it moves well inland, whatever remnant low remains, and that low moves up to the east of that frontal boundary as the front pushes eastward. So we're going to get some rain, and I also think, Joe, we'll probably get some wind Friday night into Saturday morning, particularly on Long Island and southern and southeastern New England. I think we could certainly see gusts with a southerly wind of gusts of 30 to 40 miles an hour or more. But the rainfall amounts, I think, should be manageable, maybe an inch or two at most, unless there's a thunderstorm in there somewhere, which is always possible. But there will be some heavier rains as you go into central and western Pennsylvania, western and northern New York State, and in parts of New England, and also, of course, down the Appalachians into Georgia and, into, of course, the state of Florida, where we have Nicole knocking on the door even as we speak.
Yeah, I don't think that the people, let's say in Pittsburgh or perhaps Buffalo or Rochester or Williamsport, Pennsylvania, had an idea that they would be in the target zone or they would be in the crosshairs of Nicole. I guess initially when it first developed, or that there would be a tropical system, that probably will be the coastline that'll be getting hit the worst. But no, it's not going to be that way. It looks like, we'll see some rain, but the worst of it, as you just pointed out, Joe, appears to be to the north and west of the tri-state area. And the way the speed of this system is, it looks like that we could end up with maybe a lingering shower early in the day on Saturday, but the sun will come out, and it looks like maybe, just maybe, Saturday might not be such a bad day after all.
Yeah, and of course, there'll probably be some leftover highs on Saturday, still in the 60s before the colder air comes in. Still holding on to the idea that Sunday and Monday we're probably going to have 2 days where temperatures are going to be hard pressed to get out of the 40s, which for this time of year is considered cold.
At this time of the year, it's so funny. A lot of my astronomy friends were commenting with the lunar eclipse on earlier this week. The temperature had fallen from like 70s during the previous afternoon, and by eclipse time it was down to around 44, 45. And so many people out there saying, "Oh, it was so cold. Oh, it was so cold. The chilly winds." And you know what? I wrote back to all of them. I said, you're lucky it was 45 in the pre-dawn hours in early November. Pretty darn mild, actually. The normal low temperature at this time of the year should be somewhere in the upper to middle 30s. It was in the 40s, for goodness sake, early in the morning, the leftovers from the previous day. But yeah, to have temperatures remain only in the 40s during the daylight hours at this time of the year is pretty darn cold, and it'll be even colder at night with temperatures in the 20s. And with the winds, Joe, blowing around the backside of the remnants of Nicole, or maybe the actual cold front, Sunday into Monday, we're going to be talking about some pretty harsh wind chills, making it feel more like, well, if it's in the 20s, ambient temperature in the 20s at night, factor in the wind, it could feel more like the teens. That is pretty darn cold.
Yeah, and this will probably over the weekend. The last areas that remain that haven't seen temperatures go to freezing or below, or haven't gotten their first frost. There are some areas that are still mostly warmer urban areas, or if you're surrounding warmer urban areas, they will bite the bullet this weekend and get those temperatures down below the freezing mark for the first time. So let's take a look. Let's start off with. I'm gonna start. I gotta find it. Where did I put it? I had the floater.
Where'd you put it, Joe?
I had the floater image of this darn thing. It's somewhere. Well, actually, since until I can find it.
Well, it floated away. It floated away.
It did. Meanwhile, hi to everybody on the chat board tonight, and welcome to everybody who's lurking behind the scenes, watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Glad to have you on board. Join the conversation if you like. If you have any questions or comments, we'll try to address them. And, of course, if you're new to the Joe and Joe Weather Show, we're on every night. Most nights we start at 7:30, Monday through Thursday, Sundays at 11 a.m. But tonight Joe had a library talk, and we pushed it to 8:30, which actually worked out pretty well considering what's going on. I figured I've got the satellite loop here, not the loop, I'm sorry, but the recon that is in there. And the pressure took a little bit of a nosedive late this afternoon and this evening, down to 975. And from the second fix there that the recon found, and then the third fix at 977, so it's come up a couple of millibars, but it's in that range of about, let's average it out and just say 976, dropping about, well, I think it was about 984 earlier, so that's an 8 millibar drop. And just judging from the wind barbs on the northeast side, we've got some wind barbs in the 64 to 83 knot range. Also on the northwest side. For the first time, though, it's been having the storm has been having a bit of a tougher time with convection on the south side, and that's what changed during the day today. We're seeing more activity going on south of the center, along with some strong winds of some 50 to 55 knot wind barbs in the southeast quadrant, and gales on the southwest side. It is moving along to the west, and just checking on a few observations. I've overlaid the radar so you can actually see the very large center that is just to the north of Freeport in the Bahamas. Freeport, by the way, on their latest observation is west at 41. I'm sorry, west at 26, gusting to 41, and at Settlement Point, which is a maritime ob. They're reporting a north-northwest wind at 41, gusting to 47 miles an hour. They had a peak gust to 53. I want to see if there's a peak gust. At Freeport, Joe, they had a peak gust to 61. Now, some bands of rain are coming in along the Florida coast. We have Boca Raton Airport reporting a gust to 32. West Palm Beach is at 26. Jupiter 20. Most of the wind gusts that are being reported here are in the range of about 20 to 30 miles an hour, at least for now. Actually, some of the stronger gusts are further north. That's probably that gradient that's at play. Cocoa Beach, where I Dream of Jeannie used to be. Northeast at 37. There, no gusts being reported. And at a buoy out to the east, Joe, northeast at 38, gusting to 51. So we're probably going to see these winds increasing in the next few hours as the center draws closer to the Florida coastline. And the winds going around more to the north here along the coast suggests that, I mean, to me, I'm going to be watching the winds up further to the north there to see if they start to veer a little bit more to the east to give us a clue as to actually where the landfall is going to be. But it does look as if the center is going to go in north of West Palm Beach and maybe even just maybe to the north of Jupiter. But we'll have to see what happens when it gets closer to see how how the wind field adjusts in the next few hours.
What really amazing to me is that they have decided to keep the moon rocket. I talked about this yesterday, the Artemis, on the launch pad. And normally, in adverse weather such as what we're seeing and what we'll be experiencing in the Space Coast area over the next 24 hours, normally they would have taken that rocket and rolled it back into the vehicle assembly building. I don't understand why they're keeping it out in the open. I mean, there could be, I would assume that with winds of, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, a structure like that could obviously, be pushed back and forth a bit. I just don't understand. And I also heard today that there was like a mandatory evacuation for parts of Florida, including Mar-a-Lago. But the former president has decided that he's going to hunker down there and not evacuate or not leave. So good luck to him.
Okay. Here's the satellite loop. Here's the floater image, and see some lightning strikes in a band of storms on the northern side. Yeah, one of the things with this, Joe, you look at this structurally on the satellite signature, it's a little bit odd, but it's tropical, but yet at the same time, since it was originally a subtropical, maybe we call it a hybrid system, perhaps a subtropical system, it never it's never really completely transitioned over, I think, to where it has a signature of a tropical storm, say in earlier October or in September or in August. And I think this is the impact of some of that big high building down. Probably some dry air has gotten into the mix here in some places. I know that the Hurricane Center has acknowledged that along the way on several of their discussions, that there was some dry air in the mix here. But on the other hand, it is a tight little system that is working with what it has, and right now it's actually going over the Gulf Stream. So maybe that's why we're getting this little extra juice here at the last minute before it makes landfall.
Could be kind of like one of those baroclinic events where, all of a sudden it's like injecting a little bit of steroid, atmospheric steroids into the system, and all of a sudden it begins to pop a bit. But it's kind of interesting that we indeed have a system like this so late in the season, especially since the tropical activity was almost dormant for much of July and August, when you'd expect, this kind of stuff to occur. And here we are now in early November, and we're seeing this happen. And as you pointed out, Joe, on the other side of the country, a blizzard or a potential blizzard whirling or getting ready to whirl. So
Yeah, my brother
interesting.
my brother lives in Boynton Beach, and this morning they had they actually had tidal flooding this morning. Of He's on the intercoastal waterway, and the gradient to the north with the hurricane coming in from at that time it was still a tropical storm. Nicole was moving southwestward. The winds were northeast, and that pushed a lot of water into the intercoastal waterway. And the Hurricane Center is warning for a rather strong storm surge that's going to occur north of where the center makes landfall on the order of about 3 to 5 feet. And I think that's certainly justified. Again, that big high to the north is really kind of uh, feeding into all of this because it started that northeast fetch 2 days ago, and it's you've had 2 days into a full moon and into peak high tides, which were today, by the way, and the water coming in really doesn't have any opportunity to go out. It just sort of piles on itself. So there might be there's going to be some significant coastal flooding here with this as it moves inland.
Interesting, though. Before the show started, I had mentioned that a friend of mine is going to be flying up and staying with me for a few days. And he lives in Boynton Beach, Joe. And he said his flight was pushed back a few hours. So he's coming in a little bit later. I don't know. I guess it's because of the weather and because of the storm on Friday afternoon. And one would have to think that a lot of the flights from Florida or to Florida over the next 2 or 3 days, they will have their schedules changed a bit, and maybe actually there may be a stacking up of flights arriving or departing again because of the storm. And wow, again, you just shake your head and you say to yourself, "Wow, all this is happening in early November. Amazing."
Yeah, the last advisory from the Hurricane Center. Actually, this is the 7 a.m. map. I haven't refreshed it till now. But at 7 p.m., which is intermediate advisory 11A, in case you're counting, 26.6 north, 78.5 west, maximum sustained winds are 75 miles an hour, moving west at 13, and it's onshore at 1 a.m. So it's just got another 4 or 5 hours or so before the hurricane makes landfall here. It's already at 78, so moving at 13, another 90, 13. So maybe about 6 or 7 hours. Maybe it'll be after 1 a.m. Perhaps a little bit closer to 4 or 5 a.m. before it makes landfall. Coming out the other side by 1 p.m. Thursday, it's on the Florida West Coast, not too far north of Tampa, right along the Florida Big Bend. It might even briefly emerge into the open waters of the Gulf, but it's just going to go right back inland a handful of hours later into the panhandle, and then after that we start to see it move to the northeast, and this is where it gets a little tricky in trying to figure out what the impacts are going to be because we're going to see this system weaken as it moves inland. It's also going to transition a bit to a post-tropical low, and then the front's going to come down and kind of absorb it all. So you've got all this going on, and the moisture is going to, of course, be heading on up the coast. Again, the heaviest rains are going to be away from the coast. They're going to be further inland, and we'll go through that in just a bit.
In fact, on the chat board here, David Rico writing, "Well, that means that Sir Hurricane Sandy that hit New York was just a rogue storm." A rogue storm? Was he trying to say rogue
I'm
or
not,
rouge?
Rouge storm?
A rouge storm.
I'm not
wintertime.
I'm not understanding that at all. What is he getting at?
I don't understand it either. First of all, it was an October storm, not a November storm, and Sandy came 9 days earlier in the calendar. But still, we've often said, Joe, that from from mid-August to mid-October, you can get significant hurricane and tropical storm activity. And Sandy was just a couple of weeks past that bullish time, if you will. I mean, admittedly, tropical activity is going down by late in October, but still not something that was unusual. But here, it's the 9th day of November. Tomorrow will be the 10th. and to have a storm of this magnitude, and we just had, we were just talking about historically that this is rather unusual
Well,
for this time of the year.
we've had 3 named storms since Halloween. That
Right.
that if it was August and we had 3 named storms, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But it's
Right.
been because usually, and my mindset was after we got through the storms of earlier in the month, in the middle of October, that yeah, maybe we might get one more named storm. Maybe it would be out in the Atlantic someplace, and we did get Martin, which wound up becoming a major gale center out in the North Atlantic, and probably helped the cause as far as shifting the pattern around. But yeah, it's just been a weird. The whole season's been strange. I mean, it's just been kind of strange. Uh, this is this has been one of the stranger hurricane seasons that we've had.
Yep. Yep.
WPC has a slight risk for flash flooding covering most of central and southern Florida, which I think makes sense. And then as we move into tomorrow, Thursday, so this is from Thursday morning to Friday morning, you see the slight risk moves up into North Florida and into the parts of the Panhandle, the southern half of Georgia. Marginal risk goes to the western part of the Panhandle, eastern Alabama, northern Georgia, South Carolina, and on up into the mountains of western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee. And then as we move on to Friday, they've got a fairly large area of slight risk up the Appalachians, and then it expands in central and northern West Virginia, eastern Ohio, western and central PA, western and central and northern New York, all in a slight risk for flash flooding, and a marginal risk for New England, for Long Island, for New Jersey, except the southeast, eastern Pennsylvania, and I think the marginal risk would be along the lines, in my opinion, where it looks to me like there's going to be 2 bands of rain that we'll have to deal with swinging through eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. One that comes through on Friday during the day. Then there's a bit of a break. And then
Right.
as the low goes by and the front approaches, we'll get a second band that will come in during the overnight. And if everything moves along, yeah, I think it should be mostly gone by Saturday morning. So perhaps in any one of either the first band or the second band, if there's some thunderstorms in the mix, which is certainly not out of the question, maybe even an isolated severe thunderstorm wouldn't really shock me. That might produce some locally heavy rains and maybe some localized flash flooding in a few places in the area that's the marginal risk.
Right. And again, this is certainly a better outlook as opposed to, let's say, 48 hours or 72 hours ago, when speculation was that, oh my goodness, this could be more than just some showers. We pick up, maybe some widespread flooding. But now, again, it doesn't look like it's going to be overly bad. Certainly nothing I don't think that we can handle. The only problem, of course, is it comes on a Friday afternoon and into Friday night. But Friday is also a holiday. It is Veterans Day, so maybe not as many cars on the roadways on Friday as well.
Slight risk of severe weather tonight north of where the landfall takes place in eastern Florida, with a marginal risk on the western side and on the southern side. Also a small area of marginal risk in southernmost south central Nebraska, north central Kansas. For tomorrow, we have 2 areas of risk. Now, the cold front and the low in the northern plains will produce a slight risk for severe weather in parts of western Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, southeastern Minnesota, and into a small area of northern Missouri. Marginal risk surrounds that. And in the southeast, we have a fairly large area of slight risk from northeast Florida and then up through coastal Georgia, coastal South and North Carolina. That probably, I was going to suspect that there'd be a 5% tornado risk there, and indeed they have a 5% tornado risk with the 2% further inland. Let's jump to day 3, which be Friday into Saturday. SPC's got a marginal risk up to almost to Route 78 in New Jersey, southeast and south parts of south central PA, so central and south Jersey, down into Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, slight risk in the Carolinas. I think you might nudge that slight risk, that marginal risk, and maybe even the slight risk gets nudged up a little bit further to the north when we look at their forecast tomorrow when they update it. That's my guess.
I would agree. I think that they will probably expand that. Again, all dependent upon how the hurricane or tropical system develops or is engaging with that cold front during the day tomorrow. So we'll see.
And rainfall amounts from WPC. I'm going to put the day 1 through 5 rainfall amounts because the day 6 and 7 there's some more precip in there, but this covers pretty much Nicole. And the purple is 1.5 inches. The red is 2 inches or more. You start to get into the bright reds. Actually, the red is 2.5 inches or more. And then the brighter reds, there's a few spots with the brighter reds are talking about 3 to 4 inches. That's in much of eastern and east central and northeastern Florida, southern Georgia. You see an area of heavy rain in the western mountains of North Carolina. I hope I get. Honestly, Joe, I want that inch, an 1.5 to 2 inches being indicated up by me, which we could certainly use since it's only rained 4 times here since the beginning of September. And I don't think I've gotten more than 1/10 of an inch when you add all those 4 events together. So I was hiking at some of the area parks here. I was hiking the other day, and there's this waterfall that we went to, and I literally, Joe, I will tell you that running my faucet in my split sink, if I ran the faucet in the middle so that the water would just overflow on either side, that's more impressive than than the waterfalls that I saw that I went to see because it's so dry. The water's basically just trickling down. So
Yeah.
we certainly could use rain here in the south, in not all areas of the southeast, but many areas in the southeast. And again, some bigger rain, southeast Ohio, western PA, western New York, north central New York, all getting into some significant amounts. Closer to the coast, we're looking at anywhere from about 1 inch to maybe 1.5 inches. Again, if there's a thunderstorm in the mix, it's possible that there might be some places that could push the envelope a bit, go up closer to 2. But the most important takeaway is the fact that we're not dealing with a solid core that's going to run all the way up, where if you get into that core, you wind up with 3, 4, 5 inches of rain in 2, 3, 4 hours' time. That does not appear to be the case for our area, and probably not the case so much in areas to the west. This may wind up being more like the cold front absorbing all that tropical moisture and letting it out, rather than having an identifiable core moving up and producing big rains and flash flooding.
Well, that certainly would be preferable. We don't need flash flooding. Well, and I say this in spite of the fact that up here in the New York area, we've had a deficit of sorts. And of course, for a good long time, my part of New York State was in a drought situation. That's going to be updated tomorrow. But we don't need the excessive heavy duty rainfall. That's one thing that we are not looking at or not hoping will not materialize. By the way, and I apologize to him because I've had so many other crazy things happening today, and I really didn't get on Facebook all that much. However, I do notice on the chat board many people wishing Dennis Cassia a happy birthday today. Happy birthday, Dennis.
Happy birthday, Dennis.
Happy birthday to you. All right, I'm going to stop this because,
Please
I don't want to all of a sudden lose everybody on the chat board. But happy birthday, Dennis.
All right, we're at last night's upper air, just showing what's going on. And one of the reasons why, I think the primary reason why that Nicole, if you think back a few days ago when a lot of the modeling was indicating more of a coastal track or an offshore track up the eastern seaboard, I think what's happened is the trough in the west has been deeper, and you see it there. This is Tuesday night when the storm system moved into California. The ridge in the east was a little stronger, and Nicole just basically got tucked in underneath that upper high, which caused it to move southwestward. And that ridge just kind of holds on a bit longer, and the trough in the west a bit deeper, allowing Nicole to track more to the west. And instead of making the turn over eastern Florida, it's making the turn over western Florida, and as a result, it winds up heading more up the Appalachians rather than up near the coast. And you can see the western trough as I move this along through Thursday, basically just picks it up and kicks it away to the northeast. It's still an identifiable feature here on the upper air Friday evening. There is a short wave that represents that energy, but really this deep trough here is so dominant that this system just basically gets lost and it just gets absorbed by that trough. In fact, you could barely find a kink left by early Saturday morning. And then, as you pointed out yesterday, after the front goes by, it's not going to get cold immediately because we have to wait for the upper trough to swing eastward, and it does that
Right.
Saturday night and then on Sunday for sure. There's this upper trough is pretty much right on top of the coast, and this is where we start to get into the much colder airflow that'll be coming out from Canada.
Yeah, and that indeed, excuse me. Now I have a question for you, Joe. For next week, with the cold air sweeping in, and we have another disturbance moving on by Tuesday night, early Wednesday, or whatever, do you think that it might be just cold enough, not to see anything in terms of accumulation, but enough for us to maybe see the first flakes in parts of the tri-state area next week?
For Tuesday?
Late Tuesday into early Wednesday.
Yeah, I was thinking back to that November snow we had a couple of years ago. And as I recall it, Joe.
4 years ago, believe it or not.
4 years ago. I'm sorry. 4 years ago.
Time flies.
It does. So I was thinking back. I'll come back to the map in a second. But I was thinking back to that the days leading up to that, and it was one of those situations where, and this is what we're probably going to be having now to look at over the next couple of weeks as we deal with the new pattern that's setting in, the colder pattern that's setting in, not just here, but pretty much most of the U.S. is going to be seeing below normal temperatures for a while. We're going to, because of the time of year, everything is sort of marginal. And I remember thinking that a couple of days before, where it really didn't look quite cold enough, yet it was not that far off. So I think this is going to be one of these situations as we go through the next couple of weeks where we're going to see these systems running along, and maybe initially in the longer range, some may look more interesting than others, but it'll be a matter of when we get close to see exactly how much cold air do we really have, particularly at the lower levels. But to be fair to me, I didn't really give Tuesday a closer look because I've been sort of looking at this, everything that's been going on now. So we can look at it now and make the determination, make a guess, and maybe I could, I'll answer your question at that point. But here we go, back to the upper air. Once that trough goes through, you see, again, most of the country is going to be under a colder flow. And what's kind of interesting about this pattern, too, that's evolving is that there's a distinct separate jet here in the southern stream, and there are systems that are moving along it. Plus, the northern stream's going to get kind of busy through all of this. So you got stuff running around, and this could also be as we get deeper into the long range where the models don't really time out things well. So you don't know if the north is going to time out with the south, if the north is going to outrun the south or maybe lag but behind the south as the southern systems kind of move along in the flow. And that's going to be part of the challenge here with respect to what's going to happen going forward. So I'm going to we'll focus first on the short range here with Nicole, and you see it there. This is the map for 30 hours from now, or 24 hours from now, I should say. Here's this is at 8 p.m., which is on the new GFS would be the 6-hour forecast, and you see the landfall coming in right on the coast at 1 or 2 a.m., crossing over, coming out the other side. By tomorrow night at this time, it's getting onto the Florida Panhandle. Then it moves up, still a separate feature there. The cold front is at this point on Friday. This is Friday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The front is lying probably just to the west of where that surface low is. And, of course, the rain is starting to advance northward through Pennsylvania into New York. And of course, before that, you can see the heavier rains moving up into northern Florida and southeast Georgia, and then through the Carolinas. And then you see the bigger amounts on the west side of the Appalachians in eastern Tennessee, eastern Kentucky, eastern Ohio. Still an identifiable low in western Virginia Friday night, and it's still there even into early Saturday. Now, is this the model telling us? Is this the GFS trying to tell us that this thing undergoes a little bit of baroclinic deepening rather than being absorbed by the cold front? Because the southern feature on this run stays alive all the way through. That's kind of interesting.
And if that thing it does hold together, not only will there be a stronger southwesterly flow as it moves up and toward us and to the west of us, but it also would. I'm thinking about this. I'm shaking my head here, Joe. If suppose it does take that track, and it's a little stronger, and we get a little gustier, stronger south or southwesterly wind, and the clouds break, the showers end, the sun comes out. Is it possible that on Saturday we might be looking at temperatures again rising into the 70s?
Well, it would have to clear out pretty quickly. But it certainly could be. I'll look at the digital forecast. I know the digital numbers were on the high side, and I just updated them. So let's take a look at what they're doing here. Let's go to Saturday. This is the weather service. I mean, the weather service is actually forecasting highs near 70 in and around New York City and low 70s in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and southeastern New England. Eastern Pennsylvania and the Catskills are mostly upper 50s and low 60s. And then you go out to the west, in western PA, western New York, it's mostly low and middle 40s. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's not impossible that we could, it's going to take a little, you have to wait for that upper trough to come far enough east to bring in the cold air. That's not going to happen till Saturday night. So if it, yeah, why not? It's not impossible.
Yep. Crazy fall, Joe.
Yeah, and then here you can see the difference on Sunday where it's only in the 40s in northern New Jersey and the Hudson Valley, still some 50s left over in southeastern New England and Long Island, but it's mostly 40s as you go inland. And in fact, in western PA, temperatures not getting, and into Ohio, temperatures not getting out of the 30s in some places. And then Monday, as we roll along, it's all in the pretty much in the middle 40s. Low and middle 40s for highs, and even a few places up further north in the Catskills and upstate New York not getting out of the 30s. So this is a chilly shot of air. Why don't we take a look at what the nighttime lows are going to be?
Incidentally, if you got a chance, if you want to put me back on camera for a second, everybody here on this chat board has talked about the Farmer's Almanac, the Old Farmer's Almanac. What are they calling for the upcoming winter? How accurate are they? I want to show you this almanac, which is not, I guess, very well known, but it is called an almanac for New York City. It is an almanac for New York City, and it does have weather forecasts, but it's not in the standard type of way that you get from, let's say, the Farmer's Almanac. These forecasts the weather forecasts that this almanac has are done in kind of like limericks, and I want to read you the forecast. And by the way, the name of the person who does these forecasts is Professor Vaticinate, Vaticinate, Professor Vaticinate. Now, I want you to listen to this forecast. This is the November weather forecast from Professor Vaticinate. Are you ready for this?
Go ahead.
This is just for New York City. It's not for, Maine or Boston or whatever. It says, this month, we believe, will act like Jekyll and Hyde. Mild, cold. It just can't decide. Don't forget to fall back on the 6th. If you plan to run in the marathon, then take heed. You could be in for a soaking, and we're not joking. Did it rain? It did rain a little bit on Sunday. It wasn't a soaker, but there were some rain showers on Sunday. Is it too late for – now, this really blows me away. Is it too late for a brief summer encore around mid-month? I mean, Who wrote this?
Well, it's not mid-month. I mean, it was early month, but
Early month, but I mean,
close enough. Close
like
enough.
Jekyll and Hyde, mild and cold. It can't decide. Let's see what it says for Thanksgiving. They're too late for a brief. Before Thanksgiving arrives, expect gully washers. Wear your galoshes. But thankfully, the weather should improve by Turkey Day. So gobble in those rays while they last.
Oh, good
I'll have
Lord.
I've got the 2023 edition of this. I'll have to see what it says for January and February. If it's calling for a blizzard, though, take heed.
All right. Okay, let's back to the maps. I just want to
Yes.
let me get me out of here. Let's go back to the GFS and let's go here. Okay, so I don't know, just go. By the way, we could also see while this is all going on, we've got this low in southeastern Colorado with snow in western Colorado on up in through Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana, and then that low runs up into southeastern Minnesota, and you see the snows in the Dakotas with the dark blue heavier snows being indicated during the day on Thursday. That low goes well up to the north. It's kind of odd because the prior runs were pretty much having that northern low absorb the southern system. The northern low actually just disappears, and then it's all the southern system that was. I'm gonna, now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, should we be a little bit concerned with regards to maybe some gusty, certainly the gusty winds. We mentioned those earlier. I think that's going to happen. Maybe the heavier rains out to the west might wind up being heavier than advertised. So something to keep an eye on. The prior run, even the prior run was kind of holding on to that low much longer. I just want to see the new European. Yeah, even the new European's kind of doing the same idea. So that's probably something we ought to watch to see how that evolves once it moves inland in terms of dealing with the overall forecast. But you can see on the radar view of the GFS where the bands, it still has that signature look to it. There's a band that moves up the coast on Friday. So this is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday. That first band of rain with some patches of heavy rain move on through into the evening. Then there's a bit of a break, and then we get the second area that swings eastward as the low goes by, and then this is Saturday morning. The only difference, Joe, I think the GFS might be maybe a little bit slow in moving it through because it still has the back edge of the rain in northeastern Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey at 7 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it'll be done by 8 or 9 o'clock. It'll be gone. This is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the heavy rain goes up into Maine. After that, of course, as we said, we'll probably have some leftover warm air on Saturday. We'll turn colder for Sunday and Monday. Now, that next system that's diving into the southwest moves into Texas. So you see the dark blue snow in North Texas and Oklahoma, moving into Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. I mean, there's a little bit of blue being hinted in the mix there on the northern fringe Tuesday night, just north of you up into the Catskills. So you know what? If there's some cold air that's left over, yeah, maybe there might be a few flakes in the mix in inland sections and maybe a couple of ice pellets or two. This system looks on the weak side, though, because it looks like it's minoring out as it moves eastward. There's a stronger wave, though, that the models are picking up on at the end of next week that actually does bring some snow up the eastern Kentucky into West Virginia and western Virginia, and even into southern Pennsylvania, poking into New Jersey. Into New Jersey with a low that goes out off North Carolina and goes east-northeast. I don't know how real that is, but one of the things I talked about today in my long-range post on my subscription site was the fact that with the way the upper air is going to be over the next couple of weeks, it's not impossible, okay? It's certainly not impossible that we could get a chance for something to happen. If you look at this, I just give you a snapshot of the upper air at the end of the week. I mean, this is cold. This is a cold look. and that northern stream, trough after trough, just keeps dropping into the eastern part of the United States, going right into Thanksgiving and beyond. So somewhere along the way, if that northern, that northern jet's going to be moving systems along, we're going to get short waves that are dropping down in the west and then into the southwest, and then they get kicked eastward. Depending on how they match up with the north, I go back to what I've been saying for the better part of the last month. Something could happen somewhere in the next couple of weeks.
And that's really that's November, and that also, as we've been saying, remembering back to 4 years ago. By the way, 4 years ago, we had a lot of fun, making fun of Governor Murphy of New Jersey, who put the whole state on an emergency. And every storm that we had that winter, it was the same thing with Governor Murphy, making sure that the prospective emergency.
Right, we lived in a constant state of emergency, and then those days, that winter that they were they were so panic stricken that they were salting roads on days where the temperatures were in the 40s.
Right.
Because somebody might have mentioned something about snow, and rather they wasted so much salt that particular winter. That's all that really stands out to me. Here's the watches and warnings. By the way, you see the hurricane warnings over Florida, and the warnings also for the coastal waters that extend up to off the South Carolina coast, and also on the west coast of Florida. We've got the blizzard warnings at the same time in eastern North Dakota, northwestern Minnesota, with a fairly large area of winter storm warnings on either side of that. Still some winter storm warnings tonight in parts of Utah and in parts of Montana. WPC on their snowfall, this is the probability of at least 2. So you see the large area of 95% probability of at least 2 covers eastern Montana through North Dakota, northern South Dakota, northwestern Minnesota. I'm going to jump it to 8 because figure 8 is significant. And there you can see there's a fairly high probability of 8 inches across much of North Dakota, central and eastern North Dakota, and northwestern Minnesota. So this is the first. The snowfalls are. The troughs in the west, that's where we've been seeing the snow for the last week or so. Now with the pattern changing, let's see if we can come up with something in the next couple of weeks for the eastern half of the United States.
I should point out also, interestingly, for Veterans Day Friday, the temperatures conceivably with those increasingly gusty winds from the south and southwest could get up to like within a degree or 2 of 68. That is a cheapy record for Westchester County Airport. Their record is 67, and that was set just 2 years ago, Joe, in 2020. So we had record high temperatures on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of this week, and we may finish out the week on Friday with another record temperature. Admittedly, rain and shower activity and maybe even a rumble of thunder, but finishing out the week with temperatures climbing maybe close to or above a record on Veterans Day Friday. Crazy weather. And then next week, again, much colder, and we'll see what happens with the systems coming our way for the middle of next week and maybe for the following weekend. Wow, it's busy.
Yeah. James Davison says, how long does this new pattern last? Well, we're going to see the polar vortex in the stratosphere, if the models are right, the stronger part of the polar vortex, because it keeps stretching and trying to split. The strongest part of that vortex drops into eastern Canada in the next 2 weeks. Over the next 2 weeks. So I think conceivably we could see this pattern last into the start of December. So it's gonna be here for a while. This is not something that's going to go away after a couple of days. Now look, the day-to-day weather is a different story. We're just talking over the broad scale of 2 to 3 weeks. Could there be the day here and there where temperatures migrate up a bit because of a cold front that maybe comes through and you warm up ahead of it a little because that's what happens? Yeah, of course that could be the case. But those are going to be the exceptions. I think much of the time over the next couple of weeks at least, we're going to be spending it in below average temperatures, and I think that this pattern is going to hold for a while. So it's not going to go away in a week or two. I think it may last much longer than that. So on that note, let's do a. By the way, we've had a couple of super chat hits tonight, but unfortunately, I can't see them. They disappeared on my screen. So whoever it was whoever you are that hit the super chat button, whether it's singular or plural, thank you for hitting the tip jar. And if you're still on the chat board, you can let me know it was you, and we can thank you directly. All right. So in the meantime, I have Briller Jeopardy tonight, Mr. Rayo. As soon as I think I have it.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. With bated breath, I shall with great anticipation. I am looking forward to this with great anticipation. Well, if this thing doesn't load, you may have to anticipate for a little while longer. Hang on. I'm having just a smidge of trouble here. La 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 la. Please enjoy the music while your party is being reached. Okay, here we go. These are we're going to do some records in New York City, Le Parc des Centrales. Starting with Joe, the all-time record high for the month of November.
Well, didn't we just have? Well, we didn't. For Central Park, I guess we were close to it, but in the last few days, I'd say, you know what? I'm even going to say it. I'll say 80 degrees, and I'll say it was in the year 1950.
Well, you know something? You got the year right. What? You got the year right. 1950. Could you want to take a stab at the date in November?
November 2nd or November 1st?
November 1st, 1950, 84.
Wow.
84.
And you know why? And you know why that stands out in my mind is that 3 weeks later, around like the 22nd or 23rd of November, or maybe it was actually the 25th, the Great Appalachian Storm of 1950, which produced something like 2 to 4 feet of snow in parts of Virginia, West Virginia, even some wet snow in the New York area, along with some rain. This was a nasty, and I think it had broken barometric pressure records. This was a monster storm that went right up along the Appalachian Trail. And again, the only reason why I remember that record high was I remember that it was extremely warm at the very start of that month, and yet 3 weeks later, with this big storm, there was like wintry conditions, wild winds, all kinds of craziness. So was I supposed to answer that question straight out or flat out, or give the chat board a chance?
Well, no, I don't. I mean, certainly the chat board folks can participate in this. Well, how about this one? What was the lowest temperature ever in November in New York City?
Well, it would have to be. Obviously, I think it would be below freezing. The lowest temperature in New York ever in November. I think it's in the 20s. I don't think it could possibly at this early date get as far down as the teens. I'll say 20, 25.
Anybody on the chat board want to jump in on that? Let's see. Mother Rutsia says 14. Mark D42 24. Christinapedia -5 is too low. Minus okay. No, but -5 is too low. Hint. Louis Oricio 19, Leon Probitsky 14, Chuck Cardillo at 9, Johnny Sachs 22, Richard Arend. This is not my week for pronunciation. I'm sorry, Richard. 22. Mark DeCarra 25, Charlie Baker 15, Norm Roberts 15, James H 16, Steve LaPointe 18, Account 22 14. I will end the mystery, Joe. The lowest temperature ever in the month of November, 5 above zero. 5.
Wow.
5.
Holy mackerel. What year was that?
Well, would you like to
That would be the 1800s.
yes,
right?
yes, it was. Guess,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, you want to guess the date?
Oh, has to be in the second half of the month. I'll say November 25th, 1887.
Well, the highest temperature was on the first of the month, so naturally the lowest temperature wound up being on the last day of the month, November 30th.
November 30th.
1875. Ulysses S. Grant, I believe, was president at that time.
Holy mackerel.
What was the lowest daytime maximum temperature? The lowest daytime maximum temperature. This is impressive.
If it was impressive, how about, I'll say 25.
Well, it was on the same date. Craig,
the same date as the lowest temperature.
Yes, Craig Carlberg says 28. Mother Rutsia says 13. Mother is up. Dave Seismic Koi Wolf hits with the correct answer, which is 14 on November 30th, 1875. Can you imagine? I would like to see what the temperatures were through most of that month. If it's one of these situations where it was maybe in the 50s and 60s, like 2 or 3 days before, and you suddenly go all the way down to 5. That to me would be talk about shock, talk about body shock. And our last question of the night: what was the most snow ever to fall in the month of November?
Oh, it had to be. I'm going to say it had to be the storm we had 4 years ago. I think we had the Central Park at 6.6 inches.
No, the snow for the whole month.
For the whole month.
Yeah.
Well, if we had 6.6 inches in 2018, we really wouldn't need all that much more to have a snow. But then again, you know what? I stuck my neck out. I'll say November. I'll say November of 2018, 7 inches.
Not even close.
Then this had to be another one of those 1880 something or 1875 weirdies with like 16 inches of snow or whatever, right?
Well, Christinapedia says 15 inches. Miss Fowlerite says 8 inches. Craig Carberg, 27. Steve LaPointe says 18. David Carter, 22. Mark D, 42.7. Richard, I'm sorry I mispronounced your last name. Said references the storm in 1989, which I think the city got like 4 out of that, but that's not it. Chuck Cardillo, 14. Leon Probitsky, 14. David Seismic Koywolf, who better not be cheating, 19. He's got it right again. 19 inches for the month of November in the year 1898.
God. You talk about a warming trend, but the question is this incredible warm up in average temperatures a result of global warming, or is it a result of the fact that the city of New York has grown so much since the first weather observations were taken in 1869 on up until now, and that had made it into what we know now as the Heat Island? Okay. I would suggest it would probably be more a function of that.
It could be a little
as opposed to a function.
It could be a little bit of both.
Yeah, it could be. But I would put the greater emphasis on the Heat Island effect as opposed to an overall warming trend, globally or locally or whatever. But that's just amazing.
On the other hand, if you look at the period from when you look at Central Park's records, especially from the, I would just throw this into the mix. There must have been a longer term. When I say longer term, I'm talking about maybe that lasted a few decades, some sort of cyclical longer term pattern that settled in the late 1800s and lasted up into the late 19 teens. Because if you look at some of the records that were achieved in that period, there are stretches, especially in the entire decade of the 1880s, where uh, it was cold. I mean, it was not only cold in the wintertime, but it was also cold in other months. So there must have been some sort of cyclical thing that was happening, at least as far as the Northeast is concerned. I mean, I'm just looking at one particular point. You'd have to look at records for stations and surrounding to see what the weather was in all those places to come to any kind of uh, valid, any kind of conclusion that's even remotely valid. But that was definitely some. I think that was some sort of cyclical cold period. And Christinapedia points out, by the way, that on April 25th, 1898, the United States declared war on Spain following the sinking of the battleship Maine in Havana Harbor on February 15th, 1898, and the war ended with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. See the things that you can learn just watching the Joe and Joe weather show. I mean, that's interesting.
It is.
And
It is.
and on that note, this exhausted body is going to put an end to this show now and head and maybe have a little sip of wine and then head right to bed because I am very tired. I had a friend of mine visiting for the last week. My friend Phil was here, and I took him to the airport this morning. So I had to get up this morning, Joe. I set my alarm for 20 after 2 because he had a 6:15 flight, and it's a 2-hour drive. It's literally 1 hour and 59 minutes. It's an hour and 59-minute drive from my house to the airport terminal, and I get up at 2:20 and I had no power. So I had to get dressed on top of having only about 4 hours sleep because I was watching some of the election returns last night till about 10 o'clock. And I went and got 4 hours of sleep. So on top of only getting 4 hours of sleep, I had to get dressed in the dark, which I can tell you is not fun. It's a good thing I knew where I threw my clothes last night when I went to bed because otherwise I would I'm going around with the flashlight on my phone just trying to see where are the socks, where are the shoes, where are my pants, where's everything else. Um and Miss Fowlright is already ahead of me on the wine. Um Good. So yeah, I think maybe I'll have a just a little bit of wine and then go to sleep. And tomorrow, supposedly, Joe, tomorrow between 8:30 and noon, I have been told, the broadband people will be here to install the broadband. So if all goes well, and we haven't been having many problems at all in the last few weeks anyway. But if all goes well, I'll be on broadband tomorrow night. Yes, exactly.
We'll raise our glasses for that
Yes,
tomorrow night.
please do. Okay, thanks to those of you who hit the super chat tip jar tonight. Thank you again. I couldn't see who it was. They didn't post for me, but many thanks for doing that. And then Joe and I will be back tomorrow night at our regular time. Correct? 7:35.
7:35 tomorrow night. We will be here.
All right, we'll see you tomorrow night, everyone. Good night.
Night.